Do I want a white labeled service? This is our next big question when considering different platforms. What is a white labeled service? What a great question. So a white label product is a product or service produced by one company that other companies rebrand to make it appear as if they had made it. So this means that you can pay more to remove the logo on the newsletter program like created with MailChimp. So at the bottom of my emails, again, if we go back to my example here, not that one, where'd it go? This newsletter here was more like a short blog post. This was like the most boring newsletter that I ever created because it was literally an update to people just to let them know like, hey, my uncle passed away. I'm now working at a bed and breakfast. That's what this whole text is here at the top. And I'm a little crazy right now, so don't expect a lot of newsletters from me at the moment. And here's real quick the classes that I'm going to do this month still somehow. So that was like basically that newsletter for that month. Not the most exciting and best example of what a newsletter could be. But you'll notice here at the bottom, it will have the MailChimp logo and it will have information about MailChimp. Now, when thinking about the pros and cons of having that information removed, having that logo information removed, here are the pros. Sure, it may appear as if you had made the newsletter completely, but that could also be a little bit misinformative. Two, it may seem more professional. Sure. And also, yeah, maybe your readers won't get confused by the logo, like the logos. What company is yours versus the newsletter platforms? I mean, I really doubt that that would be an issue, but sure, maybe someone would see this MailChimp logo at the bottom and think that that's my company. Probably not, but possibly. The cons of not doing it though, you will be blamed for any technical issues, or sorry, the cons for doing it, you will be blamed for any technical issues with the newsletter. So if you've removed that MailChimp logo, for example, and there's some sort of issue with your newsletter, you're going to be the first person to blame, not MailChimp. Even though you're like, no, MailChimp still is the host, is the service that I'm using for my newsletters. I just have had its logo and information removed. It's still going to appear as if you're the one to blame. You're the one at fault. And so just keep that in mind. And then the main thing is you're going to have to pay for the removal of the logo and info. If you want to have that white label service, that's something you will have to pay for pretty much across any kind of platform. And so for me, I personally don't think it's a big deal having the logo there. If you do, then sure, you can upgrade and have a paid service. But for me, it's really not a big deal. And I think most people are familiar with it. That's why I don't think it's a big deal. Most people are familiar with some sort of newsletter service being used, some sort of provider. But if something you're still thinking about and you're not sure about, when we get to the questions, please raise that concern. All right, moving on. So the next thing to consider is how will I import new and existing contacts? On my MailChimp, this is what it looks like when I am adding contacts. Most of you who are taking this class are probably starting a newsletter for the first time. So you don't have any existing contacts yet for your newsletter. As you get contacts, you can simply just type them into your platform. It's really easy. Most platforms like MailChimp also have an easy means for importing contacts. So where you can actually import a list. So meaning if you do already have some long list of contacts, assuming that list is somewhere on your computer, whether an Excel sheet or maybe through like your email service provider, it's very simple, just upload or copy and paste procedure. So I really find that pretty much all the platforms have easy means for adding contacts. Definitely with MailChimp, it's very, very easy. But yeah, something to think about. Note, I mentioned this before, let me revisit this. It is important to periodically analyze your contacts and clean up your list. So again, when you're putting your time frame together, think about how much time you're going to dedicate, maybe once a month or maybe every 3 months or so, to tidying up your inbox, or sorry, tidying up your outbox, your list of contacts, I should say. So number one, you're going to want to look at your analytics. Who is not subscribing? Number two, you want to create a new segment for inactive subscribers or category. So again, if you're looking at your audience in your service provider platform, you can actually categorize the different audiences. So you can send newsletters to just one group of your contacts. So for those people who, I wrote here not subscribing, but I should have said like not engaging. My apologies, that's not the best term to use here. But for those people who are not engaging, you can run a re-engagement campaign with just those people. So those inactive people who aren't not necessarily subscribing, but interacting with your stuff, you can run a re-engagement campaign to them. So newsletters to them to see if they might be excited about reading your newsletters once again. So, and then number four, if they're still inactive, if they're still not doing it, go ahead and just delete them from your contacts. Why? A, their inactivity may negatively impact your email deliverability. So for example, with my newsletter, one thing I tried doing in the very, very first newsletter I sent out to people was surveying those readers to find out how many of them got my email in their spam box. It's hard to control that. So if you're having a lot of inactive readers, that's actually going to work against you, and you're more likely than to end up in people's spam boxes. You really want your readers to be active. B, by deleting them, it may decrease your costs. So again, if you have a paid subscription plan of like 10,000 people, but only 2,000 of them are actually reading your newsletter, you could be using a free platform. You could be using a free service. So that might not be the case with the audience that we have here tonight, this evening. Most of us are probably looking at a much smaller range of newsletter readers, but something to think about. Okay, the next thing to think about, what sorts of integration do I want? Do you want? If I go back to my MailChimp account here, all right, there's a tab here called integrations. And here I can see all the different types of integrations with MailChimp. Integrations connect your MailChimp account to all the apps and tools you already use. All right. So let's look here. Integrations could include social media accounts, your website, e-commerce stores like Shopify or Squarespace, your event calendars if you're a performer, your apps for photo and graphic design. So again, if we go back to an example here, you'll see that the way they categorize their integrations is very similar to the way I just showed in that Google slide. You'll see here that I have Facebook integrated, Instagram, Twitter. So that means that when I'm doing things on my social media, I can actually have them embedded into my newsletter. I can also do things on my newsletter that go straight to my social media. There's all sorts of cool things that you could do. Some of them are really complex and complicated. I do just basically the basics, like how can I have maybe my most recent Instagram posts featured in my newsletter? Really simple stuff. There's a lot of things on here I don't even know, like WooCommerce. I don't actually even know that one. But most of us, not most of us, but some of us tonight might have a Shopify store where you're selling art pieces or merch. So you can actually have links and pieces featured in your newsletter where it helps go directly to your Shopify store, or whatever was the last thing you updated on Shopify appearing in your newsletter. And again, as I mentioned, WordPress and MailChimp really like each other. That's why Amy was able to create this really cool survey on her website where she could even ask people, about how they found out about her, if they're an artist. Cool integrations you can do like that. Might seem, some of them might seem more complex and complicated than they actually are. That one's actually not very difficult to do, but you'll notice, like, for example, let's see, if I go to e-commerce, or no. If I go to, I'm trying to remember where exactly I found it. But like retargeting and remarketing ads, this is where it can get a little bit difficult to do, and where even MailChimp will actually even have some wording that says this is a little bit more advanced, and it helps if you already have some experience with maybe like web building, for example. So this might be somewhere where you're going to need a little bit more assistance if you're not familiar with it. So don't be intimidated by all these extra features. Remember that part of the reason that there are all these extra features is to sell you on the platform. They want you to be like, wow, look at all this cool stuff. I'm going to do it, right? But there's so much here on MailChimp that I don't use at all, that I don't do at all. I'm just really sticking to the basics, and that's totally okay. So yeah. All right. And then next, this is the last one actually. What level of customization do I want? Pretty much with all of the platforms that you are going to look at, there's going to be all sorts of types of customization you can do. And some of it gets a little bit more advanced. I wouldn't say MailChimp gets too advanced, especially if you're using just a free account. But again, if you don't really have a lot of web building experience or even graphic design experience, like you don't need those advanced features anyway. You just need basic customization. Again, I'm just using very simple templates in MailChimp, and they look good. They look really professional. In fact, sometimes if they're too crazy, people are less likely to read them. I think about this a lot, like as a drummer. Don't know if you've noticed, I have all my drum equipment back here behind me. It's not set up at the moment. I need to set it up again. But when I think about rhythms, if it's too busy, people tend to not dance to it. Where if it's a little bit simpler and groovy, more people dance to it. So just something to think about with your newsletters. If they're like too long and there's too many crazy things happening visually, then they're less like, your readers are less likely probably to engage with your newsletter. Keeping it simple is good. And thinking about like the things that you like to read online, what kind of formats are they in? Is there white space? Is there a lot of text or less text? How is it, all set up and laid out? These are things we'll talk a little bit about next week. Yeah, you all will need to do a little bit of research to see what levels of customization are possible for each platform and what would suit your design preferences. I really recommend creating a template, again, using a template rather than creating from scratch. And again, especially if it's your first time. And definitely if you're someone, again, who's not very familiar with different design tools, if you've used Canva before, that's a really great website for kind of figuring out how to use templates for design purposes. You can even create a logo in Canva if you're looking to do a logo. That's a really great website to start out with. But I wouldn't, especially for your first time, try to take on too much. Try to keep it really simple at first, because the last thing you want to do is get overwhelmed, burn out, and give up on a strategy too quickly. You really want to, again, really try it. All right.